Too Close to Call is a sports talk radio show brought to you by Kevin Mahalik, featuring commentary on the week's biggest sports news and events and engaging behind-the-scenes player interviews. While specializing in Philadelphia sports, Too Close to Call will also discuss issues and events happening on a national scale.
Everything's coming up. Aces, aces. Aloha and hello out there, everybody. What's going on? It's your host, as always, Kevin Mahalik with Too Close to Call Sports here on Usala Media and Usala Radio. Thanks for joining us here today. It is Tuesday, March 17th at 1 p.m., just after the hour. However, you're not seeing my beautiful face on Facebook today or YouTube. That's due to the lovely coronavirus that everybody knows everything about, or nothing about, whichever way you want to look at it, because I am recording Monday evening from the home studio. My 2-year-old is at home with us due to all the schools being closed, and it's quite difficult to record with her around the house, so I had to wait to put her down, and here we are late night Monday evening. So if I'm a little less vocal, a little less energetic, sporadic, that's due to the fact that it's late here and my daughter's sleeping a few feet above my head right about now. But for the first segment here, obviously we're going to discuss what everyone's talking about out there, the biggest story there is, and that's the coronavirus and the effect that it's had on the sports world. Obviously, we're going to discuss in general some things about the virus, but being the sports program here with Usala Media, we're going to have a sports angle while discussing this virus that is currently spreading like crazy throughout the globe. Not even America, but the globe, obviously, affecting sports internationally, soccer overseas, quite a few different coaches, managers, they're called over there, soccer players have tested positive, a few athletes stateside have tested positive, but I want to take you guys down the list of the effect that it's had across all the different sports, keep you guys updated on what's going on with each sport, where they currently stand, and what we're looking at here moving forward. So the only league that is acting business as usual, so to speak, and that's because it's the only league that doesn't have any games coming up in the near future, and all of the activity can take place over the phone or online. They've canceled all in-person meetings, and that's the National Football League. The NFL today, again, recording this Monday, so now that you're hearing this yesterday, the 16th was the opening of free agency, and we have a ton of moves to discuss. And the second segment here is going to be all about the NFL and moves across the board, and then we're going to wrap up the last segment with your Philadelphia Eagles and the moves they've made and what this means for them moving forward. But that'll be exciting. That'll actually be something to talk about on the field, sports specifically, because everybody else has come to a complete halt. The NBA was the first domino to fall. Like I had mentioned, Rudy Gobert testing positive. Obviously, when you look at a player who tests positive, the fact is that they could be contagious for up to a week prior without showing any symptoms, and that's the harm with this virus is you don't show symptoms and you could have it and spread it. But once that happens, the NBA had no choice but to suspend, quote-unquote, that's the term they're using, and again, terminology has been very key over the past couple of days, but they've suspended the season because if you look at all the teams the Jazz played within the past week, then you look at all the teams those teams played within the past week, and very, very quickly, you get to all 30 teams, and their coaching staffs, the players, everybody, they've been told to self-quarantine for the next 2 weeks to determine if they have any symptoms or if they show any progression to being ill, because as of right now, it is only Rudy Gobert and teammate Donovan Mitchell who have been tested positive. As of Monday night, no other player, Christian Wood, has also tested positive. He is a center or forward for the Detroit Pistons, who played Philadelphia in the Wells Fargo Center not too long ago. He spent most of the night going up against Joel Embiid. So that's where the concern comes, obviously. Well, if Gobert got it and he gave it to Wood, maybe Wood gives it to Embiid, and so on and so forth. So locally in Philadelphia, we'll have to keep an eye on Joel, see how he's feeling. We haven't heard anything from him on social media the past couple of days. But that would be an individual who wouldn't surprise me if we end up seeing this eventually come around, even if they don't show symptoms. Donovan Mitchell did an interview basically saying he's ready to play a 7-game series. He hasn't even shown a fever, a cough, or anything like that. And that's the problem. You don't show any symptoms and you spread it like I mentioned. So hopefully Joel's fine even if he does get it. But obviously the NBA put on hold for at least a month or two. They're saying 30 days, we're going to reevaluate what's going on. That puts you into April. Then you're looking at May, June, and possibly finishing up this year into July or even August and playing a shortened end of the regular season. I don't see a way that they get a full 82 in by the time they get back. Next up on the list was NCAA March Madness. I'm recording this on Monday. Selection Sunday should have taken place on the 15th. However, obviously that was taken from us, and the NCAA took the next step, which obviously ended up being a good one the more we're learning here, but they canceled all spring sport championships as well. Baseball, softball, lacrosse, anybody playing in the spring, they canceled all the championships, so obviously all of the university and colleges followed suit by canceling the seasons. Now, the NCAA did come out and say anybody playing a spring sport is going to be granted an additional year of college eligibility. So even though they're going to continue in classes and continue to work for credits this year, they're going to be granted an additional year of eligibility. But the question then becomes, and one that I haven't seen been asked too often yet, is who is paying for these scholarships? Because just take baseball, for instance. Say you have 10 scholarships across the board, maybe 2 or 3 of them are seniors, and they were going to graduate, and then obviously you're giving that scholarship now to an incoming freshman because you have a scholarship limit. So is the NCAA going to change the limit on scholarships just for next year? Because everybody who this year goes into next year, but what if you were a freshman and your scholarship now extends for an additional 3 or 4 years? And are they going to make you choose between that 5th-year senior who now has an additional year of eligibility, or are they going to make you pick an incoming freshman? Are they going to allow you to have both? It's obviously a loaded question, and it's going to be a heck of a thing to watch here moving forward, because that's a lot of money when you look at it. Full rides at across all Division I sports, even schools like Lehigh, all the way up to the best of the best, like Michigan for baseball, ranked number 1 this year. Everyone's going to have these questions, and there are just not answers right now. But obviously, giving the kids another year of eligibility is the right move. I myself, being a spring sport athlete, couldn't even imagine playing 10 games and then being like, well, this year's done, it's over. You work so hard in the offseason and year-round to play for your championship, and to have it taken from you on a pandemic or in a national emergency, you have to give these kids another year. So I commend the NCAA. Obviously, they'll figure out those follow-up questions later, but I just wanted to put that out there right now. Who the heck is going to be paying for these scholarships when everybody gets back? Next up was the National Hockey League. The NHL, they followed suit the day after the NBA and suspended their season. They had just released a statement. They were going to come out and play in front of empty arenas. However, again, Rudy Gobert tests positive. He was just in Wells Fargo, or Christian Wood tests positive. He was in Wells Fargo. Well, the Flyers were there the day before. They used the same locker rooms. Those visiting teams are in the same locker rooms that they use, because Philadelphia isn't the only city with crossover in the arena with basketball and hockey. That's pretty common across the U.S. But when it comes to the local team, obviously we're pretty upset here in Philadelphia, because the Flyers were playing great hockey for the first time in a long time and were pushing for first place. They were currently in second behind the Washington Capitals. They had passed the Pittsburgh Penguins. Let's see here, 1 point behind the Capitals for first place. They had 13 games remaining. Obviously, this suspension of the league is going to go into, once again, June, July. And I don't know if they're going to go right to the playoffs and cancel these 13 games, as well as the least amount of games played here across the league looks like it's 68. So do you take away the 69th and possibly the 70th game for those teams who have played them? Some teams have even played 71. So do you take away the last 3 games for teams like the Canadians and what their point total was? Now, they lost 3 straight, so they wouldn't lose any. So, the Senators would lose 2 points if that's were the case. So what are you going to do there? Do you come back right into the postseason? And if you do, obviously, do you get a warm-up period? Do they get a week of games just to kind of get their legs back? Because, again, they've been told to self-quarantine as well due to the crossover in the arena. So they're not working out on the ice. They're not able to get to the arenas. It's the month of March. There's no ice outside to where they can go by themselves and skate around. So they're going to come back not exactly in game shape. And if they do go right into the postseason, is that going to give us a poor product on the ice? Are we going to want to see that? But obviously with the Flyers where they are, we want everything in the power to happen to bring this season back. They were 9-1 in their last 10, but with this break, that hot streak going in is not going to matter. It's with the play coming out of it, it's going to matter, obviously, because they're in second place. And if they would, they'd go right into a playoff series with the Pittsburgh Penguins where they would have home ice. And honestly, I'm all for that. I wouldn't mind a playoff series with Pittsburgh coming out of this, getting everybody back and revved up. And that's the problem. Even if they do come back, there's no way they're playing in front of fans. They're going to be playing in practice arenas. They're going to be playing in empty arenas wherever the least amount of cases are. It's going to be fascinating to watch what happens across all sports, not just the NHL. The last of the 4 major sports, and one that they're all tricky. They're all in a crazy situation, but Major League Baseball was in the middle of spring training, obviously scheduled to start the season in 2 weeks when this epidemic hit. And over the course of the weekend, news continued to evolve. I spoke to my friend Ryan Presley, currently with the Houston Astros, over the weekend, and he basically said, we don't know what the heck's going on. We had a meeting, and they gave us 3 options. They told us we could stay in the spring training area, we could head back to the city where our team plays, or we could head back to our hometown. In Ryan's case, those are both Houston, Texas, or Florida. But in other players, obviously, that could differ. And then a lot of players have international ties and aren't able to return home because their teams in Major League Baseball is worried if they were to leave the country, they would have trouble returning and getting back in when this does finally slow down in a couple of months. But so far, Major League Baseball, Rob Manfred, the commissioner, has sent out that they're looking at least 30 days here of a delay. I spoke with Ryan, who said his agent and agents across the league would be very, very surprised if they play before the month of May. Personally, I think we're looking at June or July, and I know there was a recent report that came out that did say the month of July being ambitious, and then at that point, it looks like you're playing half a season. I had a conversation. I said, if they start in June, that's 100 games. Well, if you start in July, you're looking at 82 at the most, 70 games. And then what is that limit there on the amount of games to where you can actually play a season? Is it 50? Is it 75? How many games is enough to say, hey, this will determine who the best teams are? Because unlike the sports of hockey and basketball that are played indoors in an arena, the NFL, like I said, not currently playing, but Major League Baseball doesn't have the option to push their season later and further back, because when they end in the month at the end of October, flirting with November, it's already cold enough. There's already snow in some places when it comes to that time of year. So you're unable to push the season back a month to 2 months to finish in December. You need to finish potentially, I guess, the second week of November. You could maybe extend it 2 weeks and get away with it, but that's the question that needs to be asked, and something that I'm going to start to ask around is, within Major League Baseball, where would they be comfortable with limiting the season? 50 games, 75? What's the minimum that they could play in order to determine that they still want to have a postseason in the World Series? Because in hockey, they got through 68 games, which is just short of the end. Basketball is quite a ways in, so they have enough on film, on the ice, on the court to determine that we can say, hey, if we go right into the playoffs, you had enough of an opportunity to put yourself in the top 8 and make the postseason. The PGA Tour has also canceled all of their events. They were in the process of the Players' Championship down in Jacksonville, Florida at TPC Sawgrass, a course that I myself have played 2 different times, both times failing to break 100 down there, both times failing to get on the 17th green, which doesn't make any sense. Everybody knows the island green down there. But what you don't know, or you may know, is that, one, it's only 120 yards. It's a pitching wedge. A lot of these guys aren't even taking full swings, 9-iron at most on a windy day. But the green itself is the biggest green on the entire course. It's the easiest green to hit in the entire course based on size. The only problem is it's surrounded entirely by water. You don't get to miss in the rough to the right, or there is a little bunker in the front that they put in. But I decided to put 2 in the drink both times, head to the drop area, put another one in the drink, and haven't finished the hole either time I've played that course. But it's a beautiful course. And like I said, they got 1 round in. They did have spectators when all of this was going on. Once again, the initial reaction was to play the rest of the tournament without fans, because golf is a sport where you do have social distancing just naturally in between the groups. And if it's you and one other guy, just don't get close to the other guy. It's not that hard. But you're around the hole, you're around the flag. There's enough there is enough opportunity for overlap that they had to shut down the tour. And eventually, what everybody did not want to see was the suspension of the Masters in April. But that's another key word there. Suspended, postponed, not canceled. NCAA canceled March Madness. These other leagues have suspended or postponed everything that's going on. So the Masters will be postponed to a later date, as well as the Kentucky Derby. Word just came out that the Kentucky Derby will be postponed right now until the month of September. So instead of starting and kicking off the horse racing season with the Kentucky Derby, they'll finish the year in September with the Kentucky Derby. Major League Soccer has also suspended its season. I was going to be down at the Philadelphia Union game in 2 weeks here at the end of the month on the 28th, covering that for you guys out there for Usula Media, bringing you content from the locker room behind the scenes. But unfortunately, obviously, that was suspended and canceled. So we'll be bringing you guys that content when they decide to return in a few months, coming back. And then lastly here, the XFL has suspended for the rest of the season. That one I do believe is going to be canceled and not return. They were 5 weeks into a 10-week season, and I don't see that league having the financial stability or even the arenas, the fields to come back and play if they were to get delayed, because as well as football coming back in September, August, if you're delayed until August, there's no way you're going to want to compete with the NFL. And they've come out and said if any of their guys get opportunities to play in the NFL, if they get a contract that is feasible and realistic, that they'll allow them to pursue these opportunities and then come back if they were unable to make the roster for the National Football League. But like I said, it's a crazy time out there for sure. All sports have come to a halt. The only thing we have to talk about, thank goodness, is the NFL, and they've moved on with free agency. It's kind of been an escape for all us sports fans today out there in the world, talking NFL, talking free agency, and that's what this next segment's going to be all about. We're going to talk about all the moves across the NFL, what I think ultimately is going to happen. There's still a few big fish out there, a few dominoes left to fall, and then once those do, obviously we'll have things to talk about, and then lastly, we'll wrap it up talking birds, see how everybody likes their moves and what's going on. So hang on with us out there. We're going to pause right now for just a brief word from one of our sponsors. And then on the flip side, like I said, we'll talk NFL, we'll talk actual sports. We'll have ourselves a good time. Hang with us. If you lose, boo-hoo. Hey, look, Ma made it. Man, that's what all these free agents are saying in the NFL here. Calling mom. Byron Jones called mom and said, hey, look, Ma made it. 80-some million from the Dolphins. My, oh, my. It is just craziness going on across the NFL right now. And I am Kevin Mahalik. Once again, before we get into it, your host, Too Close to Call Sports, Usala Media, Usala Radio. Do me a favor. Follow us on all social media platforms out there, Too Close to Call, as well as Usala Media. Head to wherever you're getting your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, all of the above. Give us a follow, rate us, review. We very much appreciate helping spread the word here for sure. But getting into all the moves across the NFL, again, it is coming up here on 11:30 Monday night, giving you guys the latest here. QB Marcus Mariota agrees to a deal with the Las Vegas Raiders. Mariota going to Vegas. He's obviously going to back up Derek Carr out there. But the backstory there is Mike Mayock, now the general manager, formerly of the NFL Network. But Marcus Mariota was Mayock's top-rated quarterback coming out in 2015. I believe was his draft year. He liked him over Jameis Winston. So Mayock gets his guy who he's liked from the jump, and he obviously thinks he can turn him into a quality NFL quarterback. And scrolling down the list here, we're going to be jumping all over the National Football League. I'm going kind of based on an ESPN article here, but ex-Patriots linebacker Jamie Collins joins the Detroit Lions. Obviously there with Coach Patricia, his background with New England, their time together. He gets a 3-year, $30 million deal, which should bolster the defense there in Detroit. The Texans have reached a deal, a 3-year deal with safety Eric Murray. 3-year deal worth up to $20.25 million. And we'll hear the Texans' name again later, discussing some craziness that went on throughout the day. Let's see. The Dolphins continue spending. They add linebacker Kyle Van Noy. That's another New England Patriots linebacker who's moving on. He will be reunited with Coach Brian Flores in Miami. So a lot of people, obviously you've seen in the past, we've seen Jim Schwartz here bring in players who used to play for him because they're comfortable, they know the scheme, they've performed. So we're seeing a lot of that across the board here during the first day of NFL free agency. The Eagles signed Steelers nose tackle Javon Hargrave. We're going to discuss this in much more detail in the final segment. They signed him to a 3-year, $39 million deal with 26 fully guaranteed. So that's a 2-year guarantee that he'll be on the roster with what looks like an option for the 3rd year. The Bears land tight end Jimmy Graham. Free agent tight end Jimmy Graham signs with the Bears, 2 years, $16 million, $9 million guaranteed. And then also the Bears, it's come out, the reports are, I believe, from Ed Warner at ESPN. They're focused on acquiring either Andy Dalton or Nick Foles in Chicago. Both quarterbacks played for Matt Nagy or were members of his coaching staff. That's what it says here on ESPN. But they both played for Nagy. And Nick Foles to Chicago. Obviously, the Jacksonville Jaguars, it's been known that they do not want to move him or have said no to all the recent offers, but he can be had, obviously, because it looks like they want to go with Gardner Minshew down in Jacksonville. But Jimmy Graham getting that kind of money after subpar years in Green Bay, it just seems like a reach for the Bears, man. What's going on in Chicago? You Bears fans, give me a shout. Let me know your thoughts on everything Mitchell Trubisky, quarterbacks, Jimmy Graham, everything across the board. Let's see what's going on. The Ravens reached a 3-year, $30 million deal with defensive lineman Michael Brockers formerly of the LA Rams. $21 million guaranteed for him, so Michael getting paid, that's for sure. The Falcons will be cutting cornerback Desmond Trufant. Desmond could look good in Eagles green, potentially starting on the outside. Could be a cheaper option than Byron Jones, who they missed out on, and we'll get to that deal here just next, actually. Here it's next on the list, but the Falcons saved $4.9 million with the cap. He had 3 years, $35 left on his contract, but they were looking to get out of that deal at $12 million a year. Like I talked about, the Dolphins made a splash signing Byron Jones, gave him 5 years, $80+ million, making him the highest paid corner in the NFL. And I don't know how you're going to pay you're going to give Byron Jones the most money to play corner when he's had 1 interception in 2 years. And the Eagles were very much involved. They loved him coming out of the draft just a few years back. Obviously, it was a bidding war between the Dolphins and the Birds. But one thing a lot of people aren't talking about, I've seen a few comments on it, but a lot of people aren't talking about the fact that Florida has no state tax on their income. So if he's going to get paid that in Florida and the exact same thing in Philadelphia, he's going to eventually make more money down there for the Dolphins. So I certainly see why Byron Jones would love to play in the city Miami and be the top paid corner in the NFL. That's a no-brainer from that side of things. The second-rated corner on the market, James Bradberry, formerly of the Carolina Panthers, he signed a deal with the New York Giants. The Giants continue to try to add high-end talent in the free agent market. They've done this in years past. It hasn't really worked out for them, but they signed James Bradberry for a 3-year, $45 million deal with 32 of it guaranteed. So that does seem 2 years fully guaranteed. He'll get some money if they cut him in the third year, but 3 years, 45 for Bradberry, and then 5 and 80 plus for Jones. The quarterback market was hot this offseason, that's for dang sure.
What the hell's going on out here?
You just can't pay that much for a corner. It's just with all the other options out there, all the other problems the Birds have, they couldn't go that high. The Titans re-signed offensive tackle Dennis Kelly to a 3-year deal. Locally, we remember the name Dennis Kelly. He was traded from the Birds to the Titans for Dorial Green-Beckham, DGB, who was out of the league in a year, and here we are years later. Dennis Kelly's getting 3 years, $21 million. So when trades happen, don't be too quick to judge out there, because basically what it comes down to is teams don't give up on high draft picks unless they know for sure that person is a bum. It's the way it happens. You don't get DGB for Dennis Kelly if the Titans aren't well aware that this guy is never going to figure it out. You think you got the best of it, the Birds. Oh, my God, we're getting a former first-rounder for a backup kind of swing offensive lineman. No, this guy stinks. And, good for Dennis Kelly. Keep making that trade look bad for the Philadelphia Eagles. The Cleveland Browns agreed to terms with quarterback Case Keenum. They've agreed to a 3-year, $18 million deal with $10 million guaranteed. That is perfect backup money. $6 million a year the first 2 years. It looks like guaranteed. He'll back up Baker Mayfield, obviously in Cleveland. He'll be a solid veteran presence. He's been to the NFC title game, got his tail kicked in Philadelphia, but he's been to the NFC title game. He'll be a solid presence in the meeting room, solid presence in the film room. Started many games in this league for multiple teams. It's going to be a good influence for Baker Mayfield, and that was a name the Birds could have potentially been interested here for the backup quarterback position. So to see him move at that price was a little frustrating, knowing that the Eagles are eventually going to have to make a move for backup quarterback, but good for Case Keenum. If Baker Mayfield doesn't pan out, they got a solid second option now in Cleveland, and you can add his name to the list of, 25 quarterbacks they've had since winning a playoff game or whatever the heck that jersey is where they keep adding all the names. Case Keenum eventually is going to get a start for the Browns. I can guarantee you that much. The Lions agreed to a deal with offensive tackle Halapute Vaitai, Big V of the Philadelphia Eagles. 5 years, $50 million for Big V, who is a swing backup tackle. Yeah, he was a starting tackle in the Super Bowl, has postseason experience, but watching him week in and week out, we know as a fan base that he is much better when he gets first-team reps throughout the week. He knows that he's going to be a starter. He very much struggled in those instances where Jason Peters would get all the reps during the week and then tweak something in the first or second drive, and then Big V would have to come in off the bench. So Detroit going out, paying him over 5 years, $50 million, certainly says that, hey, you're our guy. You're going to be the number one. Come in here, be ready to go. We're paying you to play. And mentally, that should be a benefit for Big V and allow Detroit to get the best version of him. Unlike us here in Philadelphia, who when he played, sometimes he played well, other times not so much. That's where just the difference in knowing you're going to start and thinking you're not going to play and being thrown in there can affect some professional athletes more than others. And Big V was certainly one of those individuals. The Browns agreed to a 3-year pact with right tackle Jack Conklin, formerly of the Tennessee Titans, one of the top free agent linemen on the market. He agreed to a 3-year deal worth $42 million and a $30 million fully guaranteed. Cleveland obviously adding up front to protect Baker Mayfield, give him a little bit more time to find all those weapons out there. Conklin, a former first-round pick out of Michigan State, is a real solid football player. In Tennessee, he was just a casualty of the cap and a casualty of the timing, because they obviously signed Ryan Tannehill to a huge deal. And you know what? That's worthy of this audio one more time.
What the hell's going on out here?
Tennessee gives Ryan Tannehill top quarterback money after 6 weeks of solid football. That doesn't make sense, but we'll get to that more. So let's see. Hey, breaking news just coming across the dash here right in front of me. Again, Monday night recording. This is good stuff. The Buffalo Bills acquire Stephon Diggs from the Minnesota Vikings. I'm going to keep you guys posted on compensation, what the Vikings got, but Stephon Diggs tweeted earlier in the day, time for a new beginning, because the Vikings paid Kirk Cousins again. They gave him a 2-year extension. That was another move that was made today. Another 50 years, I believe, was added to his deal. His 3-year, $84 million deal has turned into a 5-year, $130 million deal, top quarterback money. That's for sure, but here we go. Let's see if we can find it. Diggs and a 7th-round pick to the Bills for a 1st-round pick, a 4th-round pick, a 6th-round pick, and a 4th-round pick in 2021. Whew! Let's do that again. Diggs and a 7th to the Bills for a 1st, a 5th, a 6th, and a 4th next year. So basically you get Diggs for a 1st, kind of straight up there this year. And then you're getting additional compensation, 5th, 6th, and 4th for a 7th. So Diggs for a 1st and a 4th, then you're giving up a 7th to move up as well, which is so much more than the Houston Texans got for DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins is a top 2 receiver in the NFL. Yes, Stephon Diggs is good, but he's not top 2 in the NFL, and he went for David Johnson in a 4th or a 5th? It's just... It's crazy. That audio is the only one I could get for today that just makes total sense. Like, what is Houston doing? Bill O'Brien needs to be stopped immediately. He is ruining that team. He's going full Chip Kelly down there in Houston. Oh, my God. But let's keep going. It's crazy. Try to keep up out there. The 49ers traded DeForest Buckner to the Colts for a 1st-round pick, and then Buckner agreed to a massive contract extension that pays him $21 million a year, making him the 2nd highest paid defensive tackle, only behind Aaron Donald. So the Colts get better up front. The 49ers trade a guy who ultimately they couldn't sign to $21 million a year because they had just signed, who was it across the board? Eric Armstead. That's who it was. They signed him instead of Buckner, essentially. So obviously they had to move on from him and basically picked one or the other and then got compensation for it. So another heck of a move by the Niners there. Let's see, scrolling down, the Buccaneers bring back Jason Pierre-Paul, 2 years, $27 million, $13.5 a year. That's nice payment for Jason Pierre-Paul, who after his firework incident, we were unsure if he was ever going to play again. So he gets another $27 million. Good for JPP. I'm down with that. You down with JPP? Yeah, you know me. Oh, let's see. The Bills get former Bills defensive end Shaq Lawson goes to the Dolphins. So the Dolphins add a pass rusher, they add a corner, they add a linebacker, and now the rumor mill has it that they're possibly in on Tom Brady, loading on the defensive side of the ball. They got Parker out there for Brady. If he leaves New England gets worse. The Bills got better. They'd be the favorite in the AFC East. Heck, they may even be the favorite if if Tom Brady returns to New England, but it's going to be crazy to follow along. The Falcons landed tight end Hayden Hurst in a trade from the Ravens after they lost tight end Hooper to the Browns. The Browns add another weapon for Baker Mayfield. And let's see, Cardinals, like we said, David Johnson, DeAndre Hopkins makes no sense. The Dolphins signed Eric Flowers to 3 years, $19 million or $30 million, 19 of it guaranteed. Flowers stank. Why are you getting that type of money? I don't get that. The Colts are apparently pursuing Phillip Rivers. We don't know where he's ultimately going to end up yet. We're still waiting on Tom Brady to fall. The Cardinals transition tagged Kenyon Drake, which is why they were able to move on from Johnson and move him to Houston. The Bengals put the franchise tag on A.J. Green. The Cowboys placed the exclusive franchise tag on Dak Prescott, meaning Prescott is not able to talk to other teams, and it gives them until July at this point to work out a long-term deal. If I'm Dak Prescott, there's no way I'm playing on that franchise tag deal. If you're going to pay me, it's going to be long-term, or I'm going to sit out this year, and you're going to be screwed. So Dak has all the leverage there. I would absolutely sit out and not play on the franchise tag and wait for that big money that you just saw. Now, Ryan Tannehill got big-time money, and Dak Prescott is exponentially better than Tannehill, and his stats, his performance, his win-loss are way, way superior to Tannehill, so you got to think he blows that money out of the water. Kirk Cousins, I would take Dak Prescott over Kirk Cousins, so he's got to get more money than Cousins. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes is going to set the market here in the near future, but Dak is certainly, I believe, going to be right underneath that domino once Mahomes does sign that extension. The Bengals are franchise tagging wide receiver A.J. Green. He was a potential option, we thought, for the Birds. The Titans are franchise tagging Derrick Henry. Like we said, sign Tannehill, tag Henry. They're bringing the band back together for one more run next year. The Falcons released Devontae Freeman. He could be an option at the running back position for some quality teams out there. The Chiefs placed the tag on sack leader Chris Jones. Chris Jones may play under the tag. The Bucs franchise Shaquille Barrett. Leonard Williams was tagged by the Giants. A lot of tags being used for sure within the National Football League. And then we're getting into yesterday. Devin McCourtney re-signed with the Patriots. But that's the latest going on here. Like we said, up to the minute for you guys here is Stephon Diggs going to the Buffalo Bills. But what we're going to do now is we're going to pause for another word from one of our sponsors here. And then for the final segment, we're going to talk a lot further into the Philadelphia Eagles moves in free agency, who they signed, who they didn't sign, why I think that's a good move, why it's not. We got a few calls from some of our listeners out there discussing the moves that were made and how this may affect the draft and the ultimate direction that they're looking to go across the board. So we'll play those for you guys, get you some reactions. But hang with us out there for just a little bit longer. We're going to pause for a word from one of our sponsors. Come back for our third and final segment, talking Philadelphia Eagles, free agency, NFL draft. Stick with us. Hey, welcome back to the third and final segment here with Too Close to Call Sports on Usala Media and Usala Radio. I'm your host, as always, Kevin Mahalik. I appreciate you guys tuning in today. It is Tuesday, March 17th, and even though the sports world has stopped, we're still bringing you guys quality podcasts. We're still bringing you guys quality radio here with Too Close to Call Sports and Usala Media. This third and final segment, we're going to discuss the Philadelphia Eagles and some of the moves that they've made currently in free agency. There's only been two of them thus far, both of them on the defensive line. The first one is they signed defensive tackle Hassan Ridgeway, which doesn't move the needle very much. He is a depth defensive tackle, a very strong, stout individual, very much a run stopper. He eats up blocks, doesn't really get after the passer. He's your run-down guy, your bigger body up the middle. But the surprise of the night came when the Eagles reached a 3-year, $39 million deal with defensive tackle, nose tackle, Javon Hargrave. Now, Javon's known as a nose tackle, and this deal would make him the highest-paid nose tackle in the NFL. But obviously, the Birds play a 4-3 defense, so he's going to move over to the D-tackle 3 technique position. He's going to be playing more so over the guard than he is the center. But Javon Hargrave is an animal on the defensive line for Pittsburgh. A lot of people who know him from covering the Steelers have excellent things to say about his motor, his energy, his effort. He's coming into his own here, coming into his prime at 27 years old. Now, the follow-up question is, didn't we just sign a defensive tackle last year to big money? Don't we have Fletcher Cox currently under contract for big money? Why do we have 3 defensive tackles making double-digit million-dollar deals per year when truly you can only play 2 at a time? And I'll start off by saying, yes, that's a sound argument. However, Malik Jackson can move inside or outside. Fletcher Cox can move around a little bit. And then Hargraves, he can slide over every now and then. And then you throw Brandon Graham in there potentially for your position. But obviously last year, Malik Jackson getting hurt early on and missing the entire year, our defensive line was a problem from the get-go. It was Fletcher Cox. He was coming off an injury. He really wasn't himself till the middle of the year. And the defensive line is the straw that stirs the drink on the defense. Obviously, you either think up front or the cornerback position. The question is always the chicken or the egg. Is your defensive line good because your corners can cover, or are your corners good because your defensive line is getting after the quarterback? And when the Eagles missed out on Byron Jones and his $80-some million, that's when I think they refocused their energy to the defensive line, because the only other top option on the market, Bradbury, had already signed with the New York Giants. So the guys you're looking at now, such as Chris Harris, some of those other individuals, are looking at 1-2-year deals, not a lot of $1 million involved with those. So where do you go from there? You go back to the defensive line position. And as I look further into the Malik Jackson deal for you guys out there, so you don't have to, when it was originally signed, it was signed as a 5-year, $50 million deal, but the last 2 years are guaranteed to void and essentially are dummy years to spread out the cap hit on the deal. So it can either break down to a 2-year, $20 million deal or a 3-year, $30 million deal. And that's an interesting decision that's coming up very shortly the Eagles need to make before the start of the 2020 season, and that is whether or not to enact a $2.4 million option bonus. And with this signing of Hargrave, that makes me think the Birds are going to move on from Jackson after this year. So if they do not exercise this option, that $2.4 million turns into a bonus that is added to Malik's $7.6 million in his 2020 base salary. So basically it creates a $10 million base salary, and then it causes him to be an unrestricted free agent after the 2020 season. Now, if they don't exercise this option, then it prorates over the next couple of years, and basically he would be with us for an additional $9-10 million in 2021. But again, because of this signing, don't exercise the option. Add it to this year's deal. Get yourself a $10 million base salary with Jackson. He then becomes an unrestricted free agent. That is also a big deal, because if you're unrestricted, that means you weren't cut by your employer, and then he can be counted into the compensation picks moving forward for the draft. If he were to move on and sign somewhere else, the Birds could potentially get a 3rd or a 4th round pick back for him moving on. So you only have one more deal, one more year of Malik Jackson at $10 million before he moves on as a free agent. And then obviously Hargrave for the next 2 years you're putting next to Cox, and that's 2 individuals in their prime just putting in work up the middle. But we got a few voicemails from some listeners out there. A few individuals called in to give me their take on free agency, see what's going on, their thoughts with the draft and everything. Oh, here we go. Amari Cooper, we are live once again here. Monday night, Amari Cooper agrees to re-sign 5 years, $100 million, $20 million a year for Amari Cooper. That was another individual that the Birds had their eye on. Amari's going to stay with the boys. You trade a first-round pick for a guy, obviously you got to pay for him to stay in Dallas, but $20 million for a year for a guy who got benched against the Birds in a must-win game for the division. He's not on the field for the last play of the game because he gets taken off because of a poor attitude. That's not a guy I'm giving $20 million a year to. So Dallas, enjoy your guy at $20 million who's not even able to get on the field for the most important play of the entire season. But back to my point here, we got some calls from some fans. Let's run those audio, and then let's discuss afterwards their thoughts and ultimately which direction we're headed.
What up, Miho? What up, fam? Giving me a call. It's your boy Pag. Had to call about this Hargrave signing. Huge sign for the Birds. Solidifying up that middle of the D-line. Still a couple moves to be made, but, man, filling in a man named Gravedigger to add along with Cox and Malik Jackson. I like the way how he did that. Missing out on Byron Jones, but I'm not paying that stupid amount of money for a cornerback that hasn't had an interception in 2 years. So, yeah, let's go get Diggs, trade for Diggs. Let's get ourselves the linebackers that we always have here in Philadelphia, some no-name guys that just do the job. Find a corner that may be in the draft, but I think I'm with you and getting another D lineman in here, maybe that dude from Iowa, and let's just get after the quarterback, man, and let these corners cover for 2-3 seconds and get the ball at the field and let Wentz do his thing. So let's get Diggs in here. Love the signing of Hargraves, and yeah, man, I'll catch you later.
Pags, what's going on, man? Thanks for calling in. Obviously, you guys listening out there, that call took place before the news of Stephon Diggs going to the Buffalo Bills, so that will not be happening. But Pags was discussing he likes the Hargrave deal with Malik Jackson. I just told you guys about how that's going to be a one-year deal with the three of them. He's not too upset that they didn't pay Byron Jones $18 million a year. I agree with him there, but Pags, I know Pags, he's a buddy of mine. His history is defensive line, offensive line from his playing career, so he very much knows that the teams are built up front, and the most successful teams we saw in the postseason, once again, were built up front. The San Francisco 49ers, an electric defensive line, and the Tennessee Titans, offensive line, obviously their running game, very important. So he wants to fill in the defensive line. He mentioned my guy from Iowa. I'm a big A.J. Espinosa fan when it comes to this draft, the 2020 draft. A hybrid D-tackle, D-end, kind of a late first, early second round pick. 21, maybe too high for him, and I don't know if he'll be there in the second round, so maybe one of those in-between guys for the Birds, but depending on some of their moves, maybe they trade down 10 picks, pick up an extra second or a third, take Espinosa, put together the 2 3s and the 4, get back into the second round, get a quality receiver, get Hamler on the outside, so you get a quality D-tackle, D-end, and then you get Hamler in the second round there as well. So wheeling and dealing Howie Roseman, that's the way I think you need to move. Because looking back, I was watching the Eagles Super Bowl DVD because there's not a lot on television right now when it comes to sports, and just that defensive line and the difference that they made that entire year for that team. Cox, Chris Long, Barnett had a heck of a year, Graham, Timmy Jernigan before his back injury was putting in work. Again, watching San Francisco dominate all year with their front four. And the National Football League, the way the rules are written nowadays for the receivers to get open, the quarterbacks to have success, very much a passing league. The way you defend and the way you stop guys is to get after the quarterback. And Howie Roseman knows that, and obviously made this move knowing that, hey, we're going to have one more year at Jackson. Cox is getting a little bit older. We're going to need a young stud on the interior to continue to push the pocket and get after the quarterback. Now, Pags mentioned the linebackers. Yeah, we have no linebackers right now, but we've never had linebackers for the Philadelphia Eagles. And I do agree we need somebody else and an outside presence from pass rusher, because Derek Barnett, he's been a good NFL player, but he hasn't been worthy of the 14th overall pick. And somebody who broke Reggie White's sack record at Tennessee, I believe it's fair to say, has been a bit of a disappointment at the NFL level if you're looking at production-wise. But we got another call here from my buddy Quill. We're going to run that one here, see his thoughts on today's activity for the Birds, and yeah, let's hear from Quill.
Hey, Kev, it's Quill. Just giving you a call, following up on this Hargrave signing today and the Byron Jones miss out, in my opinion. Kind of disappointing to see that we spent so much money on a nose tackle, not addressing the biggest need. I do know the D-line is kind of the foundation of the defense, but still was really looking to address the cornerback situation prior to the draft, and then still need to address, obviously, the wide receiver position with DeAndre Hopkins move today. And, you know, some people out there questioning whether or not how we should have pulled the trigger on that deal, but I think that was more of a money situation versus, you know, giving up what they gave up for him in the second and the fourth and player. So as far as draft's concerned, just wanted to see what you're looking at. I'm not a fan of the spending of Hargraves, but still would like to see Ruggs end up in a Eagles uniform here in the first round, and then from there address possibly a D lineman, obviously a linebacker, a safety, and definitely have to get some O-line depth here as well. So also, what is your take on the depth of the O-line. What are we going to do to address that? Now that Vitai's definitely gone, how are they going to address that? And just touch on what your thoughts are about free agency. Talk to you soon, bud.
Quill, thanks for calling, man. Dude, good point there. Something I hadn't brought up, not a lot of people are talking about right now, but the depth of the offensive line. Right now, they've said they're going to allow Jason Peters to test the free agent market. It looks like he's going to move on. Halapalute, Vaitai, he moves on. So that's 2 tackles you have moving on. Right now, you have Andre Dillard and Lane Johnson penciled in as your starters, but your only backup swing tackle right now is Jordan Mailata. And the same Jordan Mailata that has spent the last 2 years ending on injured reserve. He's had back issues both years. Reports are he hasn't had surgery, and he's been able to rehab and come back. But a guy who has a rugby background, never played NFL at college or in the NFL level, you're not going to feel comfortable going in with him as your swing tackle, or if something were to happen to Johnson or Dillard. So you're certainly going to have to add a free agent offensive tackle, because you can't go tackle at 21. You're not going to have a backup tackle at the top pick. You still have needs at corner and at wide receiver. And the top tackles are costing you a lot of money. So, there we go. We're going to surfing the web, and we're getting some background noise. But you're looking at somebody scrolling down here. I don't know who it's going to be. Are you looking at Greg Robinson, a former first-round bust who's kind of floated around? Maybe you figure you can get something out of him. Donald Penn, who's had some mysteries in his past with Oakland and is in Washington now. A few other names that Marcus Gilbert from the Cardinals. You're certainly going to make a move here. It won't be a first-day move in free agency for the Birds in the offensive line, but very much an area of concern that not a lot of people are talking about. And specifically when you talk about Dillard, keeping Carson Wentz healthy is probably the second biggest priority, if not the first priority for this team. And with no quality backup offensive tackle, and even interior-wise, you're going to go with Matt Pryor, who was okay when called upon last year, but fundamentals and technique-wise, he's not where he needs to be. He's just a big mauler of a body in there on the interior. So good call out there, Quill, on the offensive line. Going to need to make some additions there, either late in the draft as well as in free agency. But Quill's other big point, obviously, was around Byron Jones in the corner position. He thinks we're still going to have to add a corner because he wants to go Ruggs in the first round. He wants a wide receiver in the first round. He's hoping Ruggs will fall to them at 21. But that's going to be tough. I honestly think those top 3 receivers are going to be off the board no later than about 18 or so when you look at the mock drafts and you look at the needs of the teams ahead of the Eagles and ultimately what they need moving forward, which means I think it's going to be difficult. And I don't think you want to settle for Jeffers out of LSU. That's where I start to flirt with defensive line, defensive end potentially. I've also seen some mock drafts where they go cornerback. The guy out of TCU makes a lot of sense now that you've missed out on the top-end guys, because if you miss out on top-end cornerback talent in free agency, like we've talked about, this next tier of guys isn't great. So you're either going to bring back your guys, Jalen Mills, Douglas, or you're going to sign some lower-end individuals, which means you have to add high-end talent in the draft. And if that's the case, you're adding a free agency and wide receiver, because both of these positions are almost of equal need for the Birds. And we saw getting Carson Wentz weapons is very much important, as well as not allowing something like at Minnesota where they threw for 5 million yards and 50 touchdowns against the Birds, and that's not going to work. So it's an interesting point of view. Honestly, I don't think the Birds go wide receiver in the first round. I really don't. I think second or third round, potentially even moving a little bit with a trade, moving back up to go get somebody. I've seen mock drafts, again, where Hamler is available to them at 53. That's where their second-round pick is at 53. They got a couple of threes because Nick Foles gave them a compensation pick in the third round due to his contract with the Jaguars. So a lot of interesting dominoes left to fall. But catching my breath here, late at night, Monday, recording this, news still continuing to come out. The Birds, they only had a D tackle. Amari Cooper goes back. The top 2 corners are off the board. So if you're going corners, you're going more depth piece, so you're not spending money there. There's not a ton of free agent receivers still out there available for top dollar. So you're looking to spread this money across the board now and add a lot of good players and not spend top dollar on great players, because adding maybe, $15 million a year? They had $40 million. So that gives them down to, say, 25. It's 5 to 7 maybe a few more this year because they finally have 8 or 9 picks for the first time in a while. And if those guys are going to make the team because Howie wants to get younger and he's going to hit on these draft picks, you're going to have to put away, I don't know, $8-9 million. So that leaves you 16 or so left in order to spend in free agency, which allows you enough to probably get 2 good players, potentially a backup tackle, and then either a corner or receiver, and then you're pretty much up against the cap. And then you're moving on to do everything else offensively through the draft. So it's going to be very interesting to see ultimately where they end up, where these next couple of days end up. All the movement continues to shake out, where those second-tier guys, how much money they make, where they end up. If the Birds can maybe get a few lower-end deals, maybe you spread 3 guys across the board. You pay $6 or $5 million for the backup offensive tackle, and then you get 10 or 11 to spread across a corner, a safety, a linebacker, things along those lines. And then obviously you're making your moves in the draft to fill out and round out your roster. But that'll wrap it up here for today's episode of Too Close to Call Sports here on Usala Media and Usala Radio. A great episode we had for you guys today. Obviously, we let off the show with the top story that is everywhere, and that is the coronavirus and taking away all sports essentially outside of NFL free agency, which allowed me to talk to you guys for an hour today and give me some content to discuss with you guys. But we'll probably be scaling back to maybe once a week here with new episodes on Usala Media. I'm going to do what I can to get you guys episodes twice a week. Could be a little bit difficult, obviously, with the sports world kind of coming to a halt. I'm going to do my best to come up with things to talk about, get you guys quality content, quality information, but it may be difficult here as the NFL free agency continues to shake out. The draft is supposed to go on as continued. The in-person events have been postponed, but everything else is going to be going on as usual. But we'll keep you guys posted, everything going on out there. The Birds, I'm sure they're not done, so stay tuned with more moves there. And, if nothing happens, I'm sure I'll be talking to you guys soon, next Tuesday, that is. But for right now, once again, this is Kevin Mahalik, Too Close to Call Sports. I appreciate you guys listening. Peace.